I want to.
No.
Podcast
with
Chad Ferguson.
Hey everybody, this is Chad in the I Want to Know podcast. We've been battling some technical difficulties. I'm here today again, second podcast in a row, with Anshul, Fernando. I met Anshul about 3 years ago at a home and garden show. He had a booth beside the booth that I was working in, and he had this beautiful artwork with butterflies and all kinds of bugs and critters from around the world. And he was a great conversationalist. And then a couple of weeks ago, my nephew met him and started telling the story about this guy he met with all these bugs and butterflies and stuff. And I'm like, I totally know that guy. So it triggered me to invite you on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for taking so much time with my nephew. He's got a passion for biology and bugs and all that stuff. And he came over here shortly after his meeting with you, and he was like through the roof excited to talk about it. And so you may get yourself a very reasonable, if not free, volunteer out of him just so he can get the experience, because he's got a massive passion for what you do. So just to let everyone know that since you were very little, and I'll let you tell the story, have been in love with bugs and critters of all kinds, and you preserve them and make artwork out of them.
Yeah, I do. I started back in Australia where I had my childhood, and the creatures in my backyard, they were my companions. Being an only child, it helped a lot, just hanging out and being with the bugs. Yeah. And one of my earliest memories was picking up a hornet and it stinging me on my hand. And
that's so crazy.
It got me on 3 fingers, and as I was crying, experiencing the horrible pain, I was also wondering, how can something so small give me so much pain? And that was the start of my curiosity with insects. And yeah. There was a spiderling. There was an orb weaver in our backyard, and she had built this web, and she was trying to catch insects, flying insects, and I would watch her, and when she didn't have any luck, I would help her out and catch bugs for her and throw it in her web. And I managed to grow her up for over 4.5 years. Crazy. By the time I left Australia, she was huge. Yeah. With a lifespan almost 11 inches. She was catching little birds, finches, sparrows.
That's incredible that those tiny little webs are strong enough to snatch a bird that is powerful enough they can get itself airborne. Yeah. Like when you think about the whole ecosystem anywhere, it always blows my mind. So from growing up those little bit of bugs and obviously growing a passion for it, even though they're biting you and hurting you and all this kind of stuff.
Getting bitten and stung is just it's par for the course. I mean, we get bitten by mosquitoes all the time. It's not like we're immune from that. So it's not a deterrent. It's more like, okay, how do I manage myself in such an environment so I can get the most out of it? Yeah, yeah. Because butterflies are the most beautiful thing on this planet for me.
They are gorgeous. Like you look at some of the patterns and the colors that are on them. It's mind blowing how gorgeous they are.
I mean, flowers and fish, they come close in terms of beauty and pattern and geometry, but for me, butterflies are number one.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a fear of bugs and rodents and stuff like that. I love looking at them behind glass. I like to see them in documentaries and stuff, but touching them, I get a little bit freaked out. So I think that's why I appreciated your art so much, is I got to look at these exoskeletons, and I think you even had some small animals, actual skeletons. Did you not?
Yeah, I have small little finches, skeletonized, rats skeletonized, bats skeletonized. Yeah. I work with lots of different small creatures.
And you do that with another bug, right? You use bugs to clean the bone?
So there's 2 techniques. I can't have any live domestic beetles near my collection because they'll eat all the dead specimens. So we have to manage that. So we don't have any live beetles near our morgue. But we have 2 other skeleton collectors that work with us, and they have beetles, and they use their beetles to clean the flesh off the bones. And if it's a larger animal, then we can just use ammonia and hydrogen peroxide and the boiling technique to remove the flesh and just keep the bone left.
Okay, cool. So it's boiling with hydrogen peroxide.
Well, we boil it with hot water first to get all the meat really off the bones.
Okay.
And then once that's off, then we can actually use the peroxide to make it white. Yeah. Because it'll have a tan color to it.
Okay. I always thought the bone was actually white. Like,
Well, bone marrow contains a lot of properties like hemoglobin, for example.
Okay.
It can be found in the bone marrow itself, and it's actually many bones are red when they're defleshed.
really?
And so we have to actually leach all that out,
Yeah.
take the marrow out, and make sure that it's nice and white at the end. Otherwise, it just doesn't look professional.
Yeah. It might look cool though if you get a like marbling to it type of thing. Like just bleach some of it out. You can get
And Mother Nature, when the beetles do that in the wild, they clean the animal up. After one season of cleaning, the bones do turn white because of the sun bleaching.
Okay.
So it does happen naturally, but it's on a much longer scale.
Yeah.
The process for preserving that is much different than what I do with the invertebrates.
I was just going to ask you, like the butterflies and the ants and the spiders and the cockroaches and stuff like that you do. I'd like to hear that process as well.
So with any animal that does not have a central nervous system, the process for preserving it is going to be much more challenging because there's no internal structure that can prop it up so that when we dehydrate it, we have to make sure it does not fall apart or lack any structural integrity. So with a thick-bodied specimen, I often do taxidermy it. I replace the guts with cotton or paper, and that way it'll give it an internal structure so that I can actually work with it. And that allows me to even inflate caterpillars because caterpillars are just like a really spongy type of worm.
Yeah.
Right. And
so they're essentially a tube.
they're a tube, right, with
Yeah.
skin on it. And then once it dies, if you were to try and dehydrate that and preserve it with all that fluid inside, it'll just shrivel up and shrink.
Right.
And that'll lose its appeal and luster for
Yeah.
our eye. So one of the things that I do is I would just take all those insides out and replace it with something else so that it would retain that nice full structure with the color.
I highly suggest everyone go to your Instagram page. It's Butterfly Art Studio because even though it's all natural, it's not like you took a paintbrush. There was a lot of work to go to it, but it is absolutely gorgeous to see nature in its fullest, if you will.
What I pride myself in with the technique for preserving the invertebrates with the butterflies and other arachnids, I pride myself in not using chemicals. I like to use temperature instead. So I use a combination of boiling, freezing, drying.
Yeah.
In between those stages, I'm able to manipulate those wings and appendages and then stretch them out the way I want them to dry. And then if it's a really thick-bodied specimen, I would have already taxidermied it before I put it into that final state, and then I rapidly dehydrate it, and then I can frame it. Yeah. So with a butterfly, it takes me about 6 days to make a butterfly frame.
Wow.
But with the other insects, it can take anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months, based on the organism that I'm working with.
Crazy. So it's a lot of time going into those.
Right, but I'm not working every day on the same organism. I'm just doing the series of steps,
Right.
And then every few days I'm checking in on it to make sure that no wings are drooping, the structure is still retained. If I have to make fine adjustments, then I do that.
Yeah. How many critters do you have on the go at once?
Oh, well, our morgue is about 500,000 specimens where we store the dead specimens. And we have
That's going to be a big warehouse.
Yeah, it's 2,000 square feet just dead insects.
Holy time.
So we have a lot of plastic containers, a lot of Tupperware. And that's how we organize it based on species and families, so that way it's easier for us to find when other collectors order from our website. And then when I want to pull specimens to be able to work on it for an upcoming show, I have to stagger my time so that I do the butterflies, the beetles, spiders, all at different stages so that the drying time ends up being the same time so I can frame everything at once.
Yeah. So, you just spend a day or two just framing and keep the...
Exactly.
down to a science.
You got to have the economies of scale. We make anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 frames a year.
Wow.
That's a lot for just my wife and I to do. So we have to make sure that we're efficient in every step.
No kidding. Do you get your kids involved?
Yeah. So our eldest son, for many years, he was helping us out. Now he's graduated and he's on to his own life endeavors. Our middle son, he's really interested in pinning. So he helps me pin scorpions and beetles. He tries the butterflies out. The butterflies are definitely the most challenging for everyone.
Imagine. There's not much to that structure, right?
No.
Like they're probably less than, I was going to say paper thin, but they're probably less than paper thin.
Less than paper thin, yeah. If you were to blow on it, like you were trying to blow an eyelash off of someone's face,
Yeah.
you would break the butterfly with that force of a breath.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So touching the butterfly is not a non-starter. You can't touch it.
Yeah.
You got to use metal instruments to manipulate the wings.
So you would take the butterfly and put it in boiling water or in water, or you hold it above to allow it to hydrate.
Well, see, that's the old technique that I was taught when I was a kid by a door-to-door salesman.
Right.
And what he told me was I should boil the specimen and then stretch out the wings on a spreading board. He didn't tell me how and how much should I submerge the butterfly in the boiling water. I had to learn all that through trial and error. But what I realized was that having a temperature of higher than 85 degrees Celsius often actually destroys the pigments of the butterfly. So I actually developed my own technique of hydrating butterflies using a humid box with antifungal agents, and that would allow me to moisturize the muscle tissue for me to open it up without any type of issue with the pigments.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But it took years of practice.
Yeah. So and you started this when you were like 6 or 7 years old.
I started collecting and preserving when I was 5. I really became into it when I was 6, yeah. And I never looked back. I wanted to collect every single kind of butterfly that has been recorded.
Yeah.
Back when I was a young child, at that time it was about 18,000 specimens, species that had been recognized.
Yeah.
And then by the time I was an adult, it was now 20,000. And now recently I've heard numbers as high as 23,000 described species of butterflies. So,
And how close are you to hitting that goal?
Not even close. I'm not even at 50%. I have something like 7,700 different species of butterflies.
Oh my goodness. And do you display these somewhere, or are they just in storage for you?
Well, we actually have had a number of retail locations throughout Western Canada. We do pop-up shops, and we do lots of trade shows where people can view the different art pieces that we make from our collection. But we haven't actually opened up our doors to have private viewings of our actual collection because we don't have enough space.
Yeah.
Space is a huge constraint for us.
To lay out
Yeah.
7,000 butterflies, like that's going to be a half a day walk for people to get
exactly.
a brief look at them.
Yeah, I mean, there are days when I go into the morgue and I'm astonished that I actually have this species because it's escaped my memory. It's like, oh, wow.
How do you remember 7,700?
I know.
All right, that's insane.
Yeah.
I got so many things that I want to ask you.
Yeah, shoot.
One was about Australia. So are you of Australian descent?
Well, I'm half Indian, half Sri Lankan, but I had my childhood in Australia.
Oh,
so
okay.
My first 5.5 years of life was in Australia.
Okay. And that's where the passion grew. Probably there's not a better place on the world to grow passion for bugs and butterflies, right?
That's right. It really helps being an only child and being in the woods in Australia. That really helps.
I did a trip in Australia. We did 30 days there on a Kandiki tour. So I did basically from Cape Tribulation down to Sydney, hitting all the cool spots. It's a Kandiki tour. It's meant to drink and party and whatever.
Right.
But you still get to see lots of cool stuff. We had gone inland. And the whole reason I'm telling you this story is that maybe you can tell me what bit me. So we went inland and we stayed on a cattle farm for a night. So we, show up shortly after lunch. We go look at, what the cattlemen did back there. We all stayed in like the cattle housing. So like these little sheds out in a field with barbecue and stuff. And then we go and we have this big rancher's dinner and a dance and all that kind of stuff. And this was in November. Next morning we get up and we're heading out to the bus. And so we all lined up in front of the big ranch and to take a picture, and I'm wearing my Tevas, and I looked down because I felt this enormous pain in my foot, like a hot coal had dropped on my foot, and I see this tiny spider. Like for anyone listening, it was probably just a bit bigger than the eraser on a pencil, round, the circumference wise, and then of course not very tall, like a paper tall or whatever. And it was all black with a white dot on its back. And I saw it shoot off of my foot and run back under the dirt. And we take the picture or whatever. I go tell the tour manager, he's Australian, he should know. And I'm like, I got bit by a spider. My leg hurts pretty bad. And he's like, all right, well, we're 2.5 hours from Sydney, so take some Advil and just let me know if it gets worse. We're in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And so there's nothing he could do anyway. So I swallowed a couple Advil and got on the bus. And it took probably 3 hours before the pain completely subsided. Probably an hour and a half, and it was like barely there, but it took a while to go away. And this is like that stinking big.
I know. These little guys, they often have potent venom to be able to immobilize their prey, so they don't run away.
Yeah.
So once with the first bite, they get them, and then the prey drops.
Yeah, and they can just snack as they feel fit.
Well, spiders typically what they do is they want to liquefy their prey because they don't have mouth parts to chew and swallow. So they use their venom as a primary source to convert their food from a solid to a liquid that they can drink.
Oh, okay.
And so with the orb weaver spiders that I grew up with in my backyard, they'll spin a web, and often the organism is still alive within that encased webbing.
Yeah.
And then when she's ready to eat, she'll envenomate, liquefy it, and then the soup is made for her to be able to snack on whenever she wants for a number of days. But with the wandering spiders, that what you described, they are ambush predators, and they'll catch the prey, and they'll often catch prey that are bigger than it's strong enough to be able to hold on to, and so they rely on the venom to immobilize it.
Okay. And then same thing, that venom would eventually liquefy the part of the flesh, even if it was like a marsupial or something like that. It'd be enough to maybe kill it, and they would lay down and eat the small amount that liquefied.
The killing, like the fatality of venom is based always on dosage,
Okay.
right? So you can have a really mild potency venom, but if you have a huge quantity that's injected into you, that can overwhelm the system, that's going to cause a fatality. But you can also have a really potent venom and only a small drops injected, and all of a sudden, boom, the human being dies.
That's
so
crazy.
We have scorpions in the world where just one tiny little drop of that venom, if you were to divide that among 5 adults, it would kill all 5 adults within 15 minutes.
I don't know if you noticed, but I had to reset my posture because I was starting to get creeped out. It is so cool, but also so scary at the same time. We looked at moving our family to Australia when my kids were really little, and I didn't think much about the bugs or anything like that. And my wife was kind of talking about it. I'm like, listen, we'll be in a city. Like, it's like getting attacked by a bear in Airdrie. It's unlikely to happen, was my advice back then. I don't know if I'm right or I'm wrong, but I didn't see a bunch when I was there. We had, that one incident, but you get to see little lizards and spiders. I saw a huntsman, which was a super scary. That was the first real critter I saw when I was in Australia. I was in a pub drinking in Cape Tribulation, so up in the rainforest, and I walk into the bathroom, go stand at the urinal to relieve myself of the 4 or 5 beers I had, and you're sort of looking around as you're going, and there's this plate-sized spider up in the corner of the bathroom, which cut the stream off instantly, back out quietly, and go tell the bartender. And of course, they were like, "Oh, it's just a huntsman. Who cares?
He's not interested in you."
Yeah, but you ask Canadian boy, and I was terrified.
Yeah, when we're at the booth and we're selling our art pieces, people are so polarized when they see our spiders. Usually they're shrieking in fear, or they have to come over themselves to come into the booth. And sometimes my wife and I, we have a debate whether we should be displaying the spiders at all. And I say yes. I mean, when we have our booth and we're showing the specimens, we want to show a representation of what might it be like for someone to be in the jungle without the danger of being there, because they're all behind glass,
Right.
and they're dead.
We had a guy like you when I was in elementary school come to our school and do a whole presentation of all the bugs that he collected from around the world. And this stuck out of my mind because of my fear of spiders. But there was this blue spider, so probably about the size, I'm remembering a long way back, but probably about the size of the top of a pop can. So it wasn't overly big, but it was bright blue, like almost neon blue, and said that it could jump 15 feet in one leap. So this little tiny thing could sail halfway across the gymnasium. And, in my young man's mind, just like, it's going to latch onto you and sink its claws in.
For sure, yeah.
I don't even know what kind of spider it was, but...
It sounds like a P. metallica. It's an arboreal ornamental tarantula that has a high potency of venom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they don't like to come down, and they're not the ones that shoot the barbs to irritate the mammals, so they're very adept at jumping. They can move a meter a second, some of those guys.
Yeah, that is so fast. That's like horror movie style
For
fast,
sure.
right?
I was reading, they're saying that anthropologists were hypothesizing that human beings have built into them this natural fear of snakes and spiders.
Yeah.
And when we often see them, we freeze.
Right.
And freezing is actually the right thing to do when you're coming across a cold-blooded creature that uses heat sensing and motion to be able to strike at. And so when you have a creature that has reflexes that are faster than human beings' reflexes can actually adapt to,
Right.
that we don't stand a chance.
Right.
By the time they're ready to come at us, we're already done.
Right. As soon as you see it move, you know you're dead. Like, that's the way it should go down. I was listening to a psychologist talking about this in particular and how we adapt, and our eyes actually have sensors to notice those kinds of movements because we are so helpless in every other way against these creatures. Is that if this spider just makes a little movement, our eyes can pick it up so that we can stop moving or back away or whatever. And then they're adapted to, like, as soon as you look scared, they come flying at you and arachnophobia your face.
So this whole idea of looking scared and feeling the fear, it's actually a real thing.
Yeah.
Fear is a measurable thing where our heart rate responds differently when we are experiencing fear. And the vibration and the frequency of our heart rate actually does create a signal.
Hormones, pheromones, all those go out.
And to a predator, especially an apex predator, they can be triggered by those frequencies and that sense.
Yeah.
And they can behave accordingly, and that's not favorable. So remaining calm is the key when you're around these creatures.
Right. I totally agree, and we see it that the dog you met today, Rambo, my friend's dog, is a high-end Schutzhund dog, and when he's not in drive, he's kind of a goofy goofball type dog, but all of a sudden you take a stick and you shake it a little bit and it sparks a little bit of his drive, and you watch his whole body structure change. Like, it is so intense to watch. Or when you're wrestling with him when he's not in drive mode, he's kind of like goofy, mouth open, slobbering on you kind of thing. But when you get a little bit too rough with him, you just see the focus change. You're like, dang, that is, one well-trained dog, and they sense it on people, and yeah, it's crazy. So do you actually collect the live specimen, or are you gaining them from other people?
So I have a network, because it's now a business that my wife and I run. We have to have enough supply to meet the demand. And there are certain species that are going to be more popular than others. And if we were to treat this like any other business, then it would be very easy for us to just reorder stuff. But our business model is not a demand-based model. It's a supply-driven model.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a collector to begin with, and I've traveled to 29 countries now, and I've acquired literally hundreds of thousands of specimens through my active collecting throughout the world.
Crazy.
Over the last 4 decades.
Yeah.
But to keep it sustainable, because there's only so much I can collect, and whatever I do collect, there's a damage rate because I'm using nets. To get the actual product that I need, I have to actually have people on the ground in the jungles growing, breeding them, ranching them, so that I can get the species in the quantities that I need.
Yeah.
And we have to also work within the compliance of the local jurisdictions, the laws there, as well as the laws in Canada. There's international law that is an umbrella that governs the trade of insects as well, because there are a lot of poachers in this industry.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that we're not supporting any of them or incentivizing them.
Right.
We want to actually disincentivize them.
Right. Yeah, because it's same with poaching any other creature on the planet. That they're valuable, then the poachers are going to run them to extinction.
Right.
Right.
And back in the 80s, there were butterflies that were going for $2,000 for an imperfect specimen.
Wow.
And that's because they weren't being bred. They were protected. So through butterfly farming, we actually decreased the price by increasing the amount of supply to the marketplace.
Right.
So that took away the incentive for the poachers to be able to go into these protected areas and hunt illegally to be able to supply the demand. And so by bringing that price down, now everyone is able to get perfect specimens for a tenth of the cost.
Awesome.
Right? And then the species gets to flourish. The people get to have what they are desiring to have.
Yeah.
And everything gets to win with the butterfly farming concept.
So with the farming, is there genetics involved, or do they try to keep it as natural as possible? And the reason I'm asking, you've probably seen that guy that bred the snake to have the happy face
Right.
emblem on it.
Right.
And that's what I'm thinking. If there's a more popular color or shape or design or size, are they working on that, or is it just something they just natural?
So the industry is actually really interesting. There's a group of people that will be able to grow more common species in abundance. They'll either focus on one or two species and grow them in their huts, using seedlings to feed the caterpillars that they clip from their properties. There's a ranching concept where you have the entire ecosystem, the forested area, untouched, and you're just taking what you need from that, allowing the organism to just proliferate.
Yeah.
And then there are others who are really focused on the super ultra rare, high value specimens, and what they want to do is create abominations and hybrids out of them and fulfill the people who are interested in buying the Lamborghinis and the Ducatis, right?
Yeah. They get the special,
Right.
the Labradoodle or whatever
Right.
it is, yeah.
Like there are half male, half female butterflies. They're called genandromorphs, and they do fetch a huge sum of money compared to the normal male strain and the female strain.
Yeah.
And it's been tried for decades in the labs to try and create these half male, half female creations.
Sounds like it'd be valuable.
Yeah, but they have not been successful.
Okay.
So there's a lot of effort that's been done in that realm, but limited success.
Yeah. I imagine genetics of butterflies is not high on the science list.
No.
There's a couple people that maybe just for the financial.
Not the genetic side, but there's color properties that butterflies have that are very interesting for military.
Okay.
So, for example, the blue butterfly that's found in South America, it's a shiny butterfly. That shine is created by light refraction, which means that if you were to flatten the butterfly's wings on a 180 degree plane, there's 2 degrees at which it's not refracting the light back. It's going to be black. So that's what's very interesting for military. If you can have a paint that's not going to refract back from any angle that you're looking at it,
Your stealth.
that's right. That's a stealth type of machine that you've created.
Right.
And so by studying the butterfly wing property, the military would be able to develop something that has a stealth-like technology based on butterflies.
That's insane. Like you think about infrared cameras and stuff like that. That it has to have all come from nature, or the idea came from
Yeah.
nature, right? Like
Absolutely.
how do bats see? Not the bat see. I know they use sonar, but how do certain critters see at night? They got bigger eyes. Their retinas does this, and so can we put that in a camera so we can see at night? Because that's, war-wise, is super beneficial, right?
And right now, the big thing in the military, from the military aspect, is studying beetles. How they can actually have these beetles carry the cameras and be able to steer them as they're flying. So they're innocuous type of surveillance. They can look at their enemies, right?
That's like right out of a movie.
Yeah.
That and maybe there was a movie about it, but yeah, it blows my mind that most of our technology comes out of the military, but they're all stealing it from Mother Nature.
Mother Nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Brody was telling me, if I remember right, that you get lots of other people's collections as well.
So there have been 3 other collectors that have passed on, and their estate did not know what to do with it, and rather it be buried in some university collection, they decided to donate it to me. So
That's awesome.
I now have a collection that spans from 1933 until present day. Obviously, I haven't caught the specimens from pre-1975.
Yeah.
But the collection is vast, and I have specimens from the Nazi time period. I have specimens that are now extinct.
Yeah.
And the collection is priceless. So,
Do you have anything that's not been determined yet?
undescribed species, yes,
Yeah.
I have quite a few that are undescribed. I also have some that have been misidentified and described poorly because genetic studies haven't been done appropriately.
Yeah.
And some of those species are found just an hour outside of Calgary.
Really?
Yeah.
So is it mostly butterflies, or is it a wide variety?
So butterflies is what I focus on because that's what I'm passionate about, but I do all insects.
Yeah.
and that's largely because when I'm in the bush and I'm after these butterflies, all the life in the jungle is eating each other.
Right.
It's a dangerous environment, right? I mean, something's always hunting and eating something else, and often these creatures are trying to eat me. I've been bitten and stung over 2,000 times in my life. So I bring in the species that I see around me, like the spiders, the centipedes, the scorpions, the beetles, the mantids. I mean, it's all around.
I heard a description, I think it was by Joe Rogan, is that if it wasn't for housing and stuff like that, we would not have 7 billion people on this planet.
Correct.
That the Earth would win.
Mother Nature would win.
And he goes, it's an ongoing war between people and all the other critters out there. And he looks at zoos as prison camps. Like, yeah, we caught you. Nothing you could do to us here. You tell all your friends what we did. And I feel that way. I've recently started working towards my hunting license and that. I went out with a friend this year to go hunting. And, we were sitting in the bush in an area that we thought there was a path, and we were just waiting. So you sit there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, or however long you decide. But I was tucked deep underneath this snowy pine tree. And of course, I can't hunt because I don't have my license yet. So I have no gun or nothing. And you're trying not to move and make noise so that you're not spooking the deer that you're hoping to come by. And so I'm sitting there very, very still. And when you're in the woods and nothing's moving or you're not moving and you can only focus on what's going on around you, I swear I heard a fox like in the snow 2 feet away, and I couldn't turn around with the way the branches were sniffing me and trying to figure out what I was. And then there was a really weird noise that crows make, or their wings, I should say, make when they're flying in the cold. So as the day warmed up, the sound went away, but when it was cold, it was this really... It's what horror movies steal their sound from, I swear, but it was like this creepy, squealing, howling type of sound that was coming on. But when you sit in minus 20 and the crows fly above you, it's a different sound than when you're in the city or when it's warmer out.
For sure.
And so it creeped me out. I'm in the bush going, I am going to get my ass eaten out here.
Yeah.
I'm not carrying a gun. And I kept looking at John like, please don't fall asleep because you're the only one with a weapon right now.
Right.
But yeah, like everything out there, if they had the chance, are going to eat you. And I find it kind of funny, all these, and I'm not trying to bash them, but like tree hugging hippies save the animals. They're weak. They're not weak and helpless. We're maybe a little bit more violent than we need to be or aggressive than we need to be, but fair game, they'll win.
I like the saying that I heard that Will Smith said on one of the programs, One Strange Rock. He said, Mother Nature is the world's biggest serial killer.
Right.
And I think that is a very true statement.
Yeah. There'd be never a lion walking by and going, oh, that boy looks hurt. Let's just give him some space and some time.
Let's heal him.
That guy will eat you any day of the whole week. And then you look at some of the North American animals like wolves. They don't even necessarily kill you. They just start eating you from the butthole up.
Yep.
Like they'll just dig in and like
eat you alive.
You can kick and scream, dude, but
you're being eaten.
Yeah, you're going to be eaten.
I mean, I was in Bolivia this year, and I found myself being eaten alive by the insect life around me.
Yeah.
No matter how much insect repellent I had, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
These creatures would find a way, and so I would wear full-on winter clothing that I would wear in minus 20 gear here, and I would wear that there.
In the Bolivian jungle.
In the Bolivian jungle, it's sweltering heat, 30 degrees. I'm dripping in sweat,
but
I'm taping up all my openings in my sleeves. I'm wearing a headdress, and they're still coming and biting through. I've got videos of the bite marks all over my body. It was just unbelievable. And then I had 2 human botflies I had to pull out of my forearm.
Crazy.
My buddy had to pull one out of his leg.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That is scary because when they dig in and they can do a lot of damage.
For sure. And they're just, the adults, they're just passing by, landing on you for a split second, moving away.
Yeah.
And in that split second, the egg's laid on you, and you don't even know it.
Right. So what's the worst bite you've ever gotten?
Oh, that would be a centipede. I was 8 when I was envenomated by a large centipede in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
And that nearly took my life.
Really?
They have a very powerful venom. It's a hemotoxic venom. It means the red blood cells rupture and the muscle tissue begins to liquefy.
Yeah.
And I had an allergic reaction to the venom. Wow. It was bad. Yeah, at that time there was no phones or 911, so you couldn't call to get an ambulance. So
Yeah.
the adults in the house were banging on doors in the middle of the night to get in a car to get me to the hospital to get the life-saving drugs.
Yeah. So you were born in Australia.
I was
lived
born
there?
in India, and then
Okay.
at the age of 6 months, I moved to Australia,
Okay.
and then moved back to India, did my grade 1 there, and then was in Singapore for a little bit, and then came to Canada.
Why all the moving? It sounds. I moved around a lot as a kid too. But unfortunately, it was that's all good. It was BC, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, but Sri Lanka and India and Australia are all cool places to grow up.
So my father did his PhD. His postdoctoral thesis was done in Australia, and he got a full scholarship. So when he was doing his studies in India from Sri Lanka, then he got moved to Australia and then moved to Canada to do his postdoc here in Calgary. So it was through his academics that we got to travel around, and then after we settled in Canada, then my parents they decided to become humanitarians and do lots of social work.
Okay.
So their social work and humanitarian efforts took us to third world countries. And that was heaven for me because I'm into the bugs, and the bugs are most prolific in third world countries.
Absolutely. The closer to the equator,
That's right.
the poorer people are, but also the cooler the climate
That's
is, right? Well, that's very. What was your dad's doctorate in?
My father did his PhD in the philosophy of science.
Yeah.
And my mother did she has a double master's, one in logic and Indian history.
Very cool. They would be fun people to talk to.
Yeah.
So how did the business get going then? So obviously as a kid, your parents guide you through or allow you to collect buds and bring them into the house and boil them and do whatever
Right.
you did.
Yeah, but my parents were very clear. Well, when you grow up, you're going to be either doctor, lawyer, or engineer.
I love that Indians push so hard for education. All my Indian friends are like,
Yeah.
I just want to, and their parents like, they pay for it, they
Yeah.
push, but it's beautiful.
And so I'm like, no, that's not going to happen for me.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty huge point of contention between my family and myself.
Imagine.
And in '97, I had decided I was going to contact, like I'd done every job under the sun. And no matter how much money I would make, it would never be enough to fuel my hobby.
Right.
And it's like, geez, I'm being held back. So I went to the largest insect dealer in the world at that time, and I said, do you have any Alberta butterflies? He goes, not one. I'm like, would you like some?
Yeah.
He goes, for sure I would. I said, okay, well, give me a list of all the species that you would buy.
Yeah.
I'll go into the bush and I'll collect them.
Yeah.
So he gives me a list, and we agree on the prices of what he's willing to pay. Based on that, I go to the bank and I get a loan for a truck. I need an off-road vehicle to be able to get into these high, difficult areas to get into. And then I got 2 contractors. I gave them the prices that I'm willing to pay them. And off we went for 4 months into the bush, into the Canadian wild, collecting insects.
Well, it's going to be a very short season for butterflies, too.
See, the thing is, butterfly season is from April until September.
Oh, wow.
And during that time period, there's certain weeks that are going to be blooming for certain species.
Yeah.
And every species is going to have a staggered emergence. And it's coinciding with their food plants and with the flowering of their nectar sources.
Yeah.
And so we would time it. We would go to the spring, for the spring areas, we would go to BC, into the salmon arm area.
Yeah,
and then as we made it into July, we'd go into the high altitude areas, 6,000 feet above sea level, and we're trying to collect these butterflies on scree slope, the cliff edges, because they're only found there.
Yeah.
And then by the time it's time to go back to university, I had to pay my bank for the loan and pay the contractors. I had sold all the specimens to the dealer.
Yeah.
I had enough money left over after paying off my entire debt and the contractors, and I'm like, oh, well, this is viable. And so I went to Sri Lanka the next year, set up a butterfly farm there with the understanding that I would sell all my bred specimens to that dealer.
Yeah.
And that was a huge success. Within 3 months, I raised 90,000 specimens, of which it's a lot. But
How many different breeds?
I worked on 3 breeds only,
Okay.
and out of the 90,000, 60,000 had torn their own wings as they were emerging out of their chrysalis, which is normal.
Yeah.
And so we released them because we have no use for the imperfect specimens. And I was able to sell 30,000 specimens. And I thought to myself, well, the reason why he's the biggest dealer in the world is because he's got people like me and others supplying him.
Right.
Well, why don't I just do the same thing for myself?
Yeah.
So I duplicated that farming idea 24 times around
Okay.
the globe and secured my own supply. And I decided to compete head to head in the marketplace. And since '98, I haven't looked back really. I mean, I've tried other jobs, but it's been the butterflies full time.
Wow. And so do you still run all these farms?
So some of these families have come and gone out of existence. Like we were working with a charity in Central African Republic,
Yeah.
and they were run by the nuns.
Okay.
And there was a civil uprising that took place where rebels came in and hacked everyone.
Yeah.
So the orphanage, the nuns, they all got murdered.
Wow.
That ended our entire supply chain from Central African Republic. In Peru, we had 4 generations of a family that had been working with butterfly farming for generations, and they died from a landslide. All of them gone. Wow. So
That's the crazy part about third world countries in those areas, right? Is that it's so unstable.
so unstable. And then we've had families that die off from HIV.
Yeah.
And so even though I've done this 24 times, we've had families that have passed away
Yeah.
or been killed, and we now have to create new relationships. So it's been over 10 years that I've lost the family I worked with in Peru. So I'm hoping this year I'm going to reestablish a new relationship with a new family.
Yeah. That's scary to think that, I mean, one, that your business is based on, but that it's so unstable for so many people around the world. It's also giving them a real viable job that they don't have to sell their kids. They don't have to go into prostitution
That's right.
or slavery to be able to survive.
They don't have to sell their trees off for a one-time sale, and then they sell it to the logging tycoons.
Yeah.
They get a one-time payment, and then it's a pittance what they get, and then
And
they're
they probably get robbed for it anyways.
right, and then they are bound to the land that they sold to the logging company for the rest of their life, and it's indentured servitude.
Yeah.
They're basically slaves on their own land.
That's crazy.
So we through the butterfly programs that we have established, we actually have put in water wells in remote areas. We've put in schools, medical clinics, roads.
That is amazing.
And it's all through butterfly farming.
Yeah. You wouldn't think it would have that much impact out there, but it does. Is that still recording, Eric? Or is it not moving on Audacity? Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay.
Get show with our issues. That you can have such an impact around the world with something as cool as butterflies.
See, with third world mentality, I shouldn't generalize because there's different cultural differences in different areas, but the general idea is that if you incentivize a person that is in survival mode to produce something that you want,
Yeah.
and they are able to do it successfully over and over again, the moment that they're rewarded, now that's the positive reinforcement that they are now incentivized to continue that same behavior.
Right.
And that's how I'm able to get these butterflies consistently year after year in mint condition, because these people have seen the money and the effect of the money, and they want to now
Out of necessity, they would become the expert, like literally the
Right.
best person.
the best person. I defer to them because they know how to be able to navigate in some of these jungles.
Yeah.
It's some of these places are bog infested. I mean, I myself have had 18 near-death experiences related to bug collecting, and I shouldn't be here. I'm really lucky to be alive.
It's not even the bugs though, right? It's everything plus the bugs.
Right.
Like you walk through a bog, and what kind of lizard or snake or alligator or whatever
Right.
is crawling around inside there? That what have you been bitten? Like what's
I've been bitten and stung over 2,000 times, but I nearly lost my right leg to an alligator in the Amazon in Brazil.
dude?
The encounters with the animals are interesting and they're scary.
Yeah.
I've been rushed by a lone bull elephant in Sri Lanka tried to stomp me. That's all very scary. But what's more scary are people.
Yeah.
I've been
Dumbest creatures on the planet, right?
I've been held at gunpoint
Yeah.
by narco traffickers entering the jungle in Peru. I have unfortunately been kidnapped in Mexico, trying to set up a butterfly farm there.
Yeah.
The people factor when you're dealing with jungles and jungle mentality. There's no law. It's just natural law, right?
Yeah. Survival of the fittest.
Everyone's got to eat, and you got to do your best to survive and adapt.
Yeah, it's craziness. That blows my mind. I understand that it's out there. I'm not so ignorant, but it also makes me appreciate where I am right now. Like, we could go downtown,
Right.
the worst city in Canada, and what's going to happen?
Right.
Maybe a guy takes $20 from you. Like, it's pretty safe here, right?
Yeah, it's relatively safe here.
Yeah, that's insane. I just can't even imagine. So, are you still actively collecting your own, or is it almost all subcontractors now?
No, I really enjoy collecting.
Yeah.
It's a huge passion of mine. The thrill of going after a butterfly in such difficult terrain, to be able to understand its biology, its ecology, figure out how to be able to lure it to you, because these nets that I use.
It would be like fishing, right? Like, how
Yeah.
do you convince it to come over here?
Right.
Yeah.
And the obstacle is the bush. Like, you can't swing your net in the thick, dense jungle.
Right.
And some of these butterflies are flying only at the top of the rainforest canopy. How do you get them down? So you got to figure out all these techniques, how to bait them and lure them. And then if you're lucky, if you have the right aim and you swing at the right moment, then maybe you have a chance of getting it. A lot of people think that I'm just plucking them like they're flowers. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of fun.
I would imagine that just sounds. It'd be like hunting with a camera, or like
Right.
you're trying to outsmart it, figure out the system, beat the system, and get a hold of it.
And it's not like I'm going into protected areas. Whenever I go on a collecting expedition, I make sure I go to areas that are not requiring any type of permission.
Right.
And if I work in a country where it's complete ban on all flora and fauna, that I do get permission from the government to be able to enter a zone to be able to collect.
Yeah, it'd be pointless to have it snatched away as you flew or bust out of the country, right?
Well, why would I risk my entire life's work over some mishap,
Right.
Or some misunderstanding, or if I'm behaving badly? No, that's foolish.
Right. I want to hear the kidnapping story so bad.
That's a tough one. So I had a contact here in Canada where he had access to rainforest land near the Yucatan Peninsula.
Okay.
And so I went down with him, and we were staying in his apartment, and we were doing the logistical, laying out the groundwork for where we're going to set it up. And one night we had gone out for dinner and drinks, and the taxi driver, he had seen an opportunity, and he took us away from our destination, and he whistled out, and there were 8 cops that came out, and they were not the federales, they were the local police.
Yeah.
And they were in full armor gear, like metal batons. They had the Kevlar vests. They were fully armed, and then they pepper sprayed us, ripped us out of the vehicle through the window, and then they decided to have fun. So for them it was a good time. It was just another night having fun, beating up 2 guys. It was racially motivated.
I was going to ask.
They did say a few times they were calling me a effing NIGGER
Okay.
as they were urinating on me, and they took their metal batons and kept striking at my head. They had both my arms held by 2 other guys as they kept on pounding,
Yeah.
and then they curb stomped me. So it was the damage that I incurred from that that impaired my language faculties. I was fluent in 4 languages up until that moment. And then it was my buddy that had wiggled away from the beating from the other cops, and he, as he ran away, he saw that they were all on me and they were about to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
And he's yelling at them, "Why are you doing this?" Like in Spanish.
Yeah.
He's done nothing. Like, just leave him alone. And he took off his belt, and now he's swearing at them, and he's tied his belt up into a knot, and he's trying to whip at them to try and get them off me. And so they pepper sprayed him. They popped his eye out. And so now that gave me enough time to be able to stand up, and I started running towards a street lamp. And I got to the street lamp, and he managed to wiggle away, and he ran towards me, and his eye was dangling. He fell to the ground, and I picked him up, and I did a fireman's carry to the apartment. It was about a little less than a kilometer away from where we were kidnapped.
And other than being racially motivated, was this they were trying to get finances out of you, or they were having fun?
No, it was all fun for them. I was begging and pleading for my life.
Of course.
And for them, they were laughing.
Yeah.
They were pistol whipping me. And when they were urinating on me and calling me those things, you could see that for them it was having a laugh.
Really?
So when we were back in the apartment, I put we used my finger, and we put his eye back in, and I knew that I'm wrecked. I need medical attention.
Yeah.
I knew that he's wrecked. So we took a cab down to the hospital, and we saw the Federales station post on the way. So we had the cab stop. We filed a police report, and as soon as we told them that who did it, they stopped helping us. We wouldn't get copies of our statements. We couldn't get anything.
It's a team mentality, right?
So when we went to the hospital, the Federales had already called ahead and said, "Don't serve these guys." And the doctor said, "Oh, you guys are fine, no problems." Wow. So we had to be emergency evacuated out of Puebla that day.
Wow.
And it took me 9 months to recover.
I would imagine head trauma is no joke. It can have mass effects, long-term effects, lose short-term memory. Obviously, you said you lost a couple languages.
Yeah.
The brain trauma is nothing to be messed with.
Yeah, so I'm afraid to go back to Mexico.
I would imagine.
That happened January 17th, 2003, so that's a long time
16 years ago.
Yeah.
And you obviously never been back.
Never been back.
Yeah.
I have a few guys there that grow butterflies, collect butterflies. I work with them, but I don't have the courage to go back.
I don't blame you at
all. They bent my spine, popped ribs out. It gave me brain damage. No.
Yeah. I'll maybe share with us off the air because I've said this stuff before about brain damage and.
I did that again. I'm so sorry.
It's all good. And about active release therapy with our sponsor, Dr. James McIntyre. So I'll get you that information after the fact. Well, thank you for sharing that story. That is intense. My heart is pounding so much so that a little beep scared the daylights out.
Sorry.
That's all good. That is a real passion to be able to put yourself in that position to get your collection. Have you set out like a timeline or a goal to get all these species? Like you're missing 14,000 species. What's that look like?
Well, what it looks like is I have to earn a living to support our family, not only supporting the families that we have.
Kids taking all your money. It's good, buddy.
So there's families in the jungles that we support as well. So that's a very important piece of how much revenue is going to these places as well as our own living.
Yeah.
Then there's the whole maintenance of the business to keep it growing. And as long as, my goal is to actually not have to do these shows to sell the art, so I can focus on curating the collection. Ultimately, I'd love to be able to have the resources to build a museum in Western Canada, so that because we have nothing like that here, and it's a lifetime of work by a Canadian artist, and why not have that being showcased here in Western Canada? I think Western Canada deserves something like that, and it would be a shame for when I pass on to not have a legacy for others in our society to be able to enjoy and understand what this person has been doing his whole life.
Right. Not only to tell that, like, I mean, you should be taking time to write books and blogs and like
That's a lot of time involved, right?
it's a lot of time, and I
I'd
mean,
love to do that.
you could build a whole team, but it's the finances that come around it and the amount of sales, and I mean, you got a really good following right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy with how things have turned out for our business, and people seem to really like what we do.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. It's just I have a plan, and I have to get there. And there's certain things that are happening now where it's like, okay, I have to take this as my priority and leave my dream of building a museum on the back burner.
One little baby step at a time.
That's right.
That's it.
Yeah.
The lady that was here before you that I had a meeting with, and she's like this highly motivated woman of business. Like she's made millions off of Amazon and supporting, similar to you, supporting families around the world in an electronic way. So as opposed to them having to go work in a factory, she pays them a good wage to respond to emails, and she sets up all these. So it's amazing woman.
Interesting.
And what we were talking about was people's drive, right? So like your drive and mine and MMA fighters and Michael Jordan's and those people is trying to dig in to what creates this inside people is what, like, I appreciate it. I love talking to people with this drive, but I don't know where it comes from. Like, I don't come from a background of people that were highly motivated, yet, I work a 50-hour week with my job. I do 20 hours of volunteering. I'm growing a podcast. I have a clothing company. Like I do all these things, and I don't know where it comes from. And I would love to hear what your thoughts are on, on that drive, that passion.
I think my response is going to be a little, it might be interpreted as being kind of dark.
Okay.
But here goes. From a very young age, I was always taught by my mother that we are all alone,
Okay.
that we make our own destiny, we make our own future, and that if we ever want justice, we have to go out and get it.
Yeah.
So, learning that as a life lesson, as a kid, having that drilled into my head, I realized that if anything is to be, it's up to me.
Yeah.
The world doesn't owe me anything. I have to go out there and carve out my space.
Right.
And when I look at butterflies and how they live in the jungle, for example,
Okay.
everything is trying to eat them.
Right.
And butterflies are pretty innocuous. All they're doing is just drinking
Very
fluid.
non-aggressive.
Non-aggressive. They're just drinking fluid. And even if they are aggressive and territorial, they have no means of defense. Right? As soon as they're called out, they're done.
It's got the weight of a fart, basically.
Right, exactly. And what blows my mind is that this organism, the most beautiful thing on this planet, is able to not just exist, but it's able to conquer and proliferate in the most harshest of conditions.
Right.
And if something that beautiful can do that,
Yeah.
then I think my mother's teaching is actually quite true. Just be focused and go for what you want and create the life that you want to create.
Right.
Because nobody else is going to do it for you because everyone's alone.
Right.
Everyone's on their own.
Wow.
And it really did, that lesson really did drive home into me when I visited the concentration camp in Germany called Buchenwald.
Okay.
And there was a statement on the entrance of that concentration camp, and it was along the lines of, "You are all on your own."
Right.
Right. And I was like, how interesting. Looking at it from a positive perspective, that sentence, and a negative perspective.
Right.
At the end of the day, if I want something to occur in my life, if I desire happiness, if I want to have a life that's worth living, I've got to go out there and create it.
Right.
No matter what obstacle. And butterflies are my obsession.
Yeah.
And
I don't think that's that dark, though. I could see why people might think that's dark, but I really believe, I don't know what your religious background, I'm a Christian. What we believe is that God has this great plan for us, but we have to do all the work. He's just going to open the doors and direct it and lead us, and if your eyes are open. So essentially, we know there's something great out there. It just is a matter of us putting the work in to do it. And I think that's what you're saying is like, you're alone. You know that it takes, and by alone, it just means you have to do the work.
yes, you and I do differ in our philosophy where I don't think I've got a second chance. I think this is it. This life
Okay.
is it.
Yeah.
And if I am to have this attitude of woe's me, look at how tough my life is, look at all the crap I've had to go through. At the end of the day, who's that serving? That's serving the pity from somebody else that I'm getting for what? It's not moving me forward. So
Right.
instead of looking at my life experiences as being positive or negative, I just look at it as, okay, what do I got breath in me.
Yeah.
I'm still alive. 18 times later that the world tried to kill me, I'm still alive.
Right.
I might as well do what I need to do,
Yeah.
right?
I absolutely love that, and Eric can attest to this, is that first you got to do what you're supposed to do. Like, we all have things that we have to get done in a day, and you need to focus on that first.
Yeah.
And then I think big part of that, Dr. Jordan Peterson is a person I really enjoyed listening to, and in his book he talks about first let's do what's right for you. So do the work that you need to survive and grow and get to that next level. But it can't only be good for you, it has to be good for you and your family.
Right.
And the community and the world.
Right.
And to me, that was so powerful. It really changed my motivation, and I think it falls in line with yours.
For sure.
You have to do that work. You have to do the important stuff every single day.
I mean, I have no... I know how lazy I have been. I know how I procrastinated.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a human being like everyone else.
Yeah.
And I just have to be reminded. I mean, how close is death?
Right.
It's around the corner.
It could be in the next minute.
It could be in the next minute. And it's such an illusion that we all live in, thinking that we're going to live the next day.
Yeah.
And we make all these grand plans, and we forget about being in the moment.
Right. Not to bring up Jordan Peterson again, but he said something great. He's a clinical psychologist, so people come in to get therapy from him, and he'll have people come in saying that they're super, super anxious. And he goes, I don't understand how everybody isn't anxious. We're the only creatures on the planet that know we're going to die, and we sort of know the timeline a little bit.
Yeah.
So how are you not freaking out every
Right.
single day over this? But we somehow put that out of our mind, and we move on with our day. And some people are very motivated to grow things and to change the world. And I find it so inspirational knowing what the butterfly industry and you in particular are doing in it around the world. It warms my heart to know that whole industry is a big part of supporting families.
You know, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. One of the things that my wife and I have done, we wanted to create a business model that shows the world how we can do biological art in a way that actually leaves a green footprint.
Yeah.
It's done sustainably. This industry has been wrought with lots of poachers, people who are not thinking about the environment, people who are behaving recklessly. They don't have the idea of all of us should benefit.
Yeah.
They have just the greed factor. And there are elements that have tarnished this industry that make it look not very good. Mm-hmm. And I wanted, like my wife and I, we wanted to be able to be that beacon of light saying, hey, look, there's another way. We can actually do this in a way that is not so bad.
Yeah, that's inspirational. I really do appreciate the people that go the extra mile. And again, like your mom's advice, I think is valued. Obviously, it worked, and there's no right or wrong by any means. And I really try to dig into what, where that passion comes from. Like there's got to be an energy or a supply of something that drives you or keeps you focused, like that you've convinced most of your family to be on board with what you do, right? You have a son that has stepped away into his own thing, which he should be doing.
Right.
But your family supports you in what supports them, I guess.
Yeah. People have asked me that question, and I've often heard people saying, oh, it's the it factor.
What is it?
Yeah, what is that? And I don't think I can subscribe to that. I think it has to do with being focused, having drive, and perseverance.
Yeah,
I think those are the three describers I can articulate of what really is the underlying motivation for me.
Yeah,
I don't have that greed thing that is prevalent in our industry. I'm not really interested in being the biggest or the best.
Yeah.
No. For me, I want to be able to live a life that's meaningful.
Yeah.
I want to leave a legacy behind.
Right.
I don't really think my life amounts to much other than that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I'm going to be food for the maggots.
Yeah, well, what else can you expect, right? Is to do good as
Right.
best as you can and to leave a legacy. And I think that the doing good part is, doing the best you can in everything that you do.
And I like being excellent. Honestly, I like being excellent.
Yeah. I think I told you we crashed while we were trying to record our first one. I don't like losing to anybody, especially inanimate objects.
Right.
I was livid. I'm glad that you encouraged us to figure out a different solution than you coming back, which for sure I'm going to have you back again later on in the future. But yeah, there's some people that are just okay, like whatever life gets me, and I guess that's what I get. And I'm just not that person. And I don't know where it comes from. I couldn't give you a good description of what the motivation, what the drive was either. Is it it factor? Was it a gift given to me? Was it my culture that I grew up in that drove me in the opposite direction? I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of many of those factors. I don't like being told what to do.
Right.
I don't like that at all. And
So having a regular job would be miserable.
and I've done that, and
Yeah.
it's just not my thing.
What's the worst job you had?
The worst
Don't
job.
say drywall.
No, it was siding.
Oh, yeah, construction. You got to be some kind of tough to be a cider, right? They do it all year round.
Yeah.
Blistering sun or freezing cold.
Doing siding and working on the oil rigs, that was two of the lowest jobs I've had.
Yeah, yeah. And they're noble trades.
For sure. They're
Yeah.
necessary. They're noble. It's unfortunate how the system is designed so that people who are suffering from addiction can still rise up and oversee an entire crew.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And the system is designed as it is in the third world countries to keep us enslaved. Essentially, right? They encourage you to go buy the next bigger truck and the bigger house, and you need to have this and you need to have that, and everything that is priced in our economy is priced to take as much money from us. And they know the numbers. They know how to keep you as a servant.
There's a lot of unhealthy programming that's taking place on all of us.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I am so done with regular TV and news and stuff like that because all it does is try to convince you to buy something or
Right. to believe in something.
Right. I 100% agree. And I like that I choose what goes inside my head. I pick my pastors. I pick my church. I pick my podcasts. I pick my movies. I don't let the TV flow and just take what I don't even listen to the radio anymore because I can't. The power that it has over you is too much.
Yes. I find that over many things that there's a lot of unfortunate influences that affect our lives in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, one of the things that we're facing when we're in our booth and we interact with the public often has a very strong, negative, visceral reaction to the artwork, and they can see that there's something beautiful that's touching them inside, but then they think that there's something wrong, that something inside is being touched because it's a dead creature in a frame.
Yeah.
And then they want to be with righteous indignation come and chastise us for what we do,
Right.
when the first reason why they came into our booth is because they fell in love with the colors. Right? So there's this dichotomy, and then we have to navigate this very uncomfortable conversation when I'm dealing with a lot of people that have been brainwashed into thinking that collecting butterflies and insects is actually the primary source of the decline of the insect life that we see on this planet, when in fact it's regular people's daily behavior, whether they're a vegan or not. That's
Pollutants, pesticides.
Whether it doesn't matter how the human being is living, our activities are such that it is always going to be hurting some other life form.
Absolutely.
Our very existence.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of how we are integrated with Mother Nature in all of this. She's the biggest serial killer in the world.
It's a dog-eat-dog world out
It
there.
is,
And
yeah.
you just try not to die today.
So one of the things that I like to say is that 99% of all life on this planet has come and gone. It's disappeared.
Right.
We've had 5 major mass extinction events.
Yep.
We have a very tiny sliver of life that continues to remain on this planet. And if I've figured out a skill, how to make dead things last forever so that we can appreciate and learn from it,
Yeah.
I think that there is value in that.
For sure. I couldn't agree with you more. We are due any day for another mass extinction,
Sure.
and people aren't living their lives like this could be their last day. Go love on somebody, go talk to somebody, go find out who they are, go do something good. Buy coffee. I don't care. Just do something. Be grateful for where you're at.
Right.
Right. I used to teach a self-defense course out of the last church that I was at, free for the community. We fundraised, got mats and equipment and all that, and I would teach this course. And the only cost of doing the course was to tell me something you were grateful for that day.
Oh, wow.
So if you showed up, we all got into a circle. We started doing our warm-up, and before we could go into training, everybody had to give me something they were grateful for. One, it was super beneficial for me to focus on being grateful and to watch other people do the same thing. I think it was better for me than it was, honestly, for any of the students, because it completely changed my mindset to every day focus on something that you're grateful for. And there's so much power in just going, this is pretty damn good.
Right. Like I'm on borrowed time.
Yeah.
I should have been gone 18 times ago.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't I relish in the fact that I get to live another day, I get to breathe another day.
Yeah.
And as long as I've got breath in my body, I'm going to give it all that I've got.
Hug and kiss your kids and cuddle with your wife on the couch and all those beautiful things that we get to do.
Don't get me wrong. I still need to be reminded of my own principles because I get trapped.
As we all do. How do you not fall for stuff like we're...
Yeah.
You know what? I think this is a beautiful way to end the podcast, is being grateful. So thank you so much for coming and doing the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Chad. I appreciate that.
We will have you back again. Tell people how they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram at Butterfly Art Studio, Facebook, same thing, Butterfly Art Studio. Our website is www.butterflyartstudio.com.
So just Google Butterfly Art Studio, and you're going to find some amazing artwork, some great, I want to call them bugs or critters. I don't even know the right word.
Well, we do have critters, we do have bugs, but we have lots of butterflies too.
Butterflies, yeah. Go check out the butterflies. They're absolutely beautiful. So everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. And please go check out those websites, and we'll catch you at the next show. Eric, want to go to outro? Hey everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. This podcast is over.